everybody, welcome back to another episode of Disability Landscape. I'm Charlie Bros. Today I'm here with
Tricia Karlberg.
And we've got a great guest today. Go ahead and Tricia, and tell our folks who we have.
Yes, today we have Sue Abderholden from NAMI Minnesota. She's the executive director. And Sue, can you tell us a little bit about NAMI and the organization itself and what the mission is?
Absolutely, and thanks again for having me on. So NAMI is a statewide grassroots organization dedicated to improving the lives of children and adults with mental illnesses and their families. And we provide education classes, peer-led support groups, we do public awareness activities, we have a helpline, focus a lot on suicide prevention, and of course, changing public attitudes and public laws. And nearly 100% of the people who are at NAMI, board members, volunteer staff, either live with a mental illness or have family members. So we kind of are the people that we represent.
Excellent. You held the NAMI Walk back in September. How did that work in our new kind of virtual world?
So the NAMI Walk is an annual event. It's always the fourth Saturday in September. Typically at Minnehaha Park, but of course this year because of the pandemic we had to hold it virtually. Mm-hmm. It actually went surprisingly well. We called it not like do it yourself, but do it together. So find something that you can do, and we tweet it out and put up on Facebook different activities that people were doing. So we had one family that were dancing to music. That was what they did that day. We had people who did take walks. We actually had parade in place, so you could drive to certain locations and kind of watch and see what they did at their particular location. So it actually turned out well. I mean, we really missed people coming together because It's the largest awareness raising event in Minnesota and actually nearly the country around mental illness. So we did kind of miss out on that, but we raised a good amount of funds. We certainly lowered our goal from last year, just knowing virtual events are more difficult. But we still did very well.
And how many people were involved? I noticed that there was quite a few people involved.
So we think there were about 2,000 people. Usually we get over 4,000 showing up at the park. Of course, people didn't have to register this year because it was virtual. So that made it a little bit harder to kind of track attendance.
Nice. And so did they post videos of their clips so that everybody could see what they were doing?
They did. So they kind of sent them to us, many of them did, and then we kind of put them up. And then we actually made a little tiny movie reel about it so people could kind of see the different activities. The St. Paul Winter Carnival folks actually did a huge truck, and they drove it all around to try to raise awareness. So they were a great partner in this year.
Awesome.
Sounds like a good time. Unfortunately, that in the way it had to be held, but at least you still got people together in their kind of virtual way, and I think that's very important for people right now during this pandemic. And with the pandemic, have you seen kind of an uptake in the number of people wanting your services, that type of thing?
Unfortunately, the pandemic has had a negative impact on many Minnesotans' mental health. We're, in a sense, we're having a normal response to an abnormal world. We know that the number of people experiencing symptoms of depression, anxiety, substance use disorder, particularly alcohol, is up over 20%. There was a new study that just came out talking about the impact on teenagers. And we also more recently learned that for COVID survivors, 1 in 5 will develop a mental illness. And so what we've seen internally is our calls to our helpline have gone up over 35%. And it's not just a simple, gee, I think I need a support group, but very complex. So we think what's happening is people, either children or adults who had a mental illness before, those symptoms are actually getting worse. And if you're not able to really connect with telehealth, you really need in-person, you might struggle even more. So I think it's a really difficult time, and we are very concerned about what happens, the longer that the pandemic plays out.
Okay. Is there a kind of a breaking point at, during a pandemic, during the isolation that, you talk about the depression and anxiety, is how long is too long for people with the anxiety and the depression before they can really seek out human contact again, be with people?
I think if people are experiencing symptoms for 3 weeks, if it's really beginning to interfere with their ability to, to work, or if they're a student to really engage at all in education, then I would say you should reach out. And I think in the meantime, what people have to remember is there are good strategies for promoting good mental health.
Yeah.
I mean, we just have to recognize this is a terrible time. I mean, it just is, and we need to just acknowledge it. And then we have to say, so what is it that we can do to feel better? And there's a number of options. I mean, there are wonderful apps out there, Calm, Headspace, to help you with even, 5-minute meditations, which can help.
Oh, sure.
Trying to move in some way, whether it's, kind of dancing, using little weights, doing something to get the endorphins moving in your brain.
Sure.
Doing something that actually makes you feel good. For some people, it's cooking. A lot of people have picked up crafts, right, that they didn't do before, including knitting and things like that. You can see on Facebook people putting together puzzles. All of those things are actually really helpful. And the one thing that we don't think about as often as we should is a good night's sleep. So when we don't sleep well, our mental health gets frankly damaged the longer that happens. And so it's important to have kind of good sleep routines, a cool room, going to bed at the same time, putting away your phones and your devices, not having them in your bedroom or at least close to you. All of those kinds of things can actually help promote good sleep.
Yeah, I know that I picked up some good habits and hobbies during this time, including virtual improv. Charlie, do you have any hobbies that you picked up during this time?
Well, actually, this is kind of one of them. Getting into the studio, being able to talk to people, out there in the world who can identify with us and show us that we can still be together while apart.
And
I think that's a really good point. And if you know of someone that's struggling, don't wait for them to reach out to you. When you're depressed, the idea of like getting out of bed and calling someone, something like that is really hard. So we can take that extra effort to reach out to the individual.
Yeah, that's true. And Sue, can you talk a little bit about NAMI's fall author series? I believe it's on the podcast. Are you aware of that?
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite.
I'm sorry, you're the NAMI fall series podcast that you invite authors to come in or their family members to talk about mental health. Yeah.
Yes. Well, as we kind of had to move into Zoom mode, right, we were thinking, well, what kinds of things can we do to help engage people and think about mental health? And we realized that we have a lot of people who've written different books about their experience or their family's experience. And so pretty much about once a month, we have an author on who will read from, portions of their book, kind of talk about things, take a lot of questions from the audience. And I think it's been kind of helpful. When you hear someone else's story, you realize that you're not the only one. And so there's usually things that people can relate to. And especially like, how do things get better? I think that's what people really want to hear is how do things get better? And that guidance and just knowing that for someone it did get better, really helpful. So we plan on continuing that, in December and, the rest of the months. Maybe we'll keep doing this, for years to come. There are plenty of books being written about, people's experiences with mental illness to make that happen. So that's been good.
Well, you talk in terms of shared experiences. I think that really does help people connect and, lean on each other in a way that they can just cope a little better with the way things are. Now we have the holidays coming up. We have Thanksgiving, coming up this month, and the Christmas holidays, and people are recommending don't get together in large groups, don't see family. That's got to be an extra pressure for people already dealing with depression, anxiety, and any other various types of mental illnesses they can have. You have any pointers or tips to help people through a period like that?
Yeah, and I know that it's really hard. I mean, in my own family, we're not getting together with people for Thanksgiving or Christmas because we want to make sure, frankly, that people are alive next year and we can be with them.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we have to do some sacrifices now. And I think knowing that it's not permanent, that this is a temporary situation, and also, you know, I think one thing that we forget is when we volunteer, right, we feel better. When we control what we can, we actually feel less anxious. Okay. So right now for Thanksgiving and you know the holidays and you know Christmas and Hanukkah and all those other holidays, we can control what we can do to limit the spread of the pandemic. And I think that's really important to feel like you have some control over the situation. And we just have to make alternate arrangements. I don't know if people knew, but you know, you can sign up for a free Zoom account. And on Thanksgiving, I saw that Zoom said they're not going to limit you to 45 minutes, which is really nice.
Yeah.
So, you know, some ideas that people have also had is actually, you know, someone makes, you know, one of the favorite dishes and you kind of have a little bit of everything else, but you're sharing that with people. Sure. You can play lots of fun games actually using Zoom or FaceTime as well. You know, you can do bananagrams, you know, Scrabble, you can play cards, you can do all those things, and that also is helpful. The one thing I would caution people of is when they do get together at the holidays, to stop asking how people are, because everyone is really struggling, to be honest. So, you know, let's do something else. Like, so what did you do this week to kind of help yourself feel better? Right. Kind of really promoting that self-care. Yeah, and again, it's going to be really hard, absolutely. But I think that we can be resilient and we can get through this. And I think that's something that we have to pat ourselves on the back for.
Yeah, I can relate in that, you know, we spend Thanksgiving dinner with my wife's family. And, you know, every year for the last 30 years we've been married. And so my wife is finding it really difficult this year because her parents are elderly, and it's like, you know, what if we don't see them again for a holiday? And it's a terrible time, but, you know, we have to face the fact that we're keeping them safe as well.
And, you know, there's been a lot kind of written about it too, and some people say, well, you know, you can't stop doing it out of fear. And it's not about fear, it's about love.
Yeah.
And I think that is just an important perspective to put in there.
And Sue, I noticed too that NAMI offers over 30 classes that give information about mental health and treatment and so forth. Can you talk a little bit about those classes and how people can access them?
Yes. So again, right now everything is on Zoom, unfortunately, but we have an 8-week class called Family to Family that is actually evidence-based. And what we know is that when we give families kind of the information and the support, that they can better support their loved one who's living with a mental illness. And all of our classes are free. And they're also all taught by family members. So it's that kind of lived experience, not from a mental health professional. We have another one called Hope for Recovery. It used to be a 6-hour workshop on a Saturday, but we've split it into 3 hours. Of course, you know, some are in the morning, some are at night. And that's also a good way to kind of, again, get a better understanding of mental illness, get a better understanding of how you can help someone. We also have just kind of a spattering of other ones. We've heard from a lot of employers, for example, who are very worried about their employees in a way that we have never seen before. And so we offer a class called Minding Your Mental Health During COVID. And it's a great way to kind of think about, so why are we feeling how we are? And what are those strategies that can help make us feel better? We are doing 2 of the suicide prevention classes online. The other ones are too long, so we're not able to do that. And for families of children who are really quite overwhelmed right now between, you know, trying to work and trying to help their child with, you know, distance learning, We've called them NAMI moments. So they're about 15-minute videos. They're on our website that you can access them. And they cover a topic like, how do you discipline during COVID? How do you help a child who is really struggling with school?
Sure.
All of those kinds of things are a part of it as well. And again, they're free, they're online. We have a long list of classes coming up for December as well, and really kind of encourage people to do that. We've had some one-off kind of presentations on, we had one last month on gaming, online gaming and addiction. And so we had an expert on it, to talk about it and provide some very good information. So people can look for some of those specialized topics that will be offered as well into the future.
But it sounds like you offer some great opportunities for people to get assistance. If someone's in crisis, or I believe you deal with like suicide prevention and such as well with your group. Is that correct?
So we teach the class on suicide prevention. It's called Question, Persuade, and Refer, QPR. We are not the place to go if you're having a mental health crisis, if it's urgent.
Okay.
And I have to say right now it's really difficult because people don't really want to call the police, but our mobile crisis teams generally are not going out because of the pandemic.
Sure.
And so that is very problematic. And so we think actually people are getting sicker and then they have to call the police, and sometimes of course they're ending up in jail instead of the emergency room, and that's really difficult. One of the issues we're working with right now with our state government is looking at when they do the vaccine distribution, in a couple of weeks, right? So we know that healthcare workers, especially in the hospitals and nursing homes, are going to be first. That makes sense.
Right.
And then they're also talking about first responders, so police, fire, EMTs. Mm-hmm. We want to make sure that the mobile crisis team members are also considered a first responder. Because again, people's mental health is getting worse. We need them to get the vaccine so that they can go out into the community and really help people who are struggling. Right. So that we really have a healthcare response to a healthcare issue. So it does get complicated. If people want to, the suicide prevention line is up all over the place on our website, but an easier one to remember is most people text these days and make a phone call. And so you can just text MN for Minnesota to 741-741. And again, that's 741-741. Very easy number to remember.
Excellent. Trish?
Yeah. I also wanted to ask a little bit if you could talk about some of the resources that NAMI provides that include legal or employment, those types of resources. So
so we've developed a lot of booklets over the years because nothing's written down, like how do you navigate the adult mental health system or the children's system? What do you do if your loved one's arrested? What if they end up in the juvenile justice system? What really happens in an inpatient psych unit? What happens? What are some strategies a family can use to deal with a crisis? We have a new booklet out on co-occurring disorders, so substance use disorders and mental illnesses. We are working on a booklet on employment. Unfortunately, a lot of employers have no idea what an accommodation is for a mental illness. Sure. I think they kind of understand if there's a wheelchair, I might need a ramp, I might, need to move the desk up. But a mental illness, they're like, what's an accommodation for that? So we actually, the last couple of years, have been doing a presentation for employers called Mental Health in the Workplace, where we actually talk about what are some of those signs and symptoms you might see, not giving them the actual names, of the diagnoses, because we don't want them going around saying, oh, well, that person has depression. We just want them to understand that maybe a difficulty to concentrate could be related to a symptom of a mental illness. And then we go through some of the really easy accommodations that can be made just to help people start thinking about this in a different way. But we're working on a booklet. We hope to get it done, sometime in 2021 that will provide a lot of that information, but more geared to the employee. So that they can go in and really kind of ask questions about it. One kind of really, I think, touching thing that we're doing right now, we've done it for several years, and we're still doing it even though there's a pandemic, is we actually collect gifts for people, children and adults with mental illnesses who are in an inpatient psych unit or residential treatment over the holidays.
Good.
Last year we handed out gifts to over 1,000 people. And a lot of the folks that are in during that time, frankly, are, especially the adults, are homeless or really don't have much of anything. And so it's very easy. I mean, socks, hats, gloves are really popular. Word find books, because if, sometimes with people in an inpatient unit, it's hard to concentrate. Word find is a kind of an easy way to do it. And what we did this year, because of the pandemic, is on Amazon.com, we have a wish list. So people can simply click on a few things, get them shipped to our office, and then we'll be kind of distributing them the weekend before Christmas. But it is really, we've had a lot of comments. The first year that we did it for kids for quite a few years, and then we expanded to adults. And I actually had a dad call me 2 days after Christmas to say he had been visiting his daughter in an inpatient psych unit in the Twin Cities, and showed up on Christmas Day. And she had this gift, with a little card that said, from your friends at NAMI Minnesota. And he said he teared up because he said, usually we forget, both kids and adults who are in an inpatient unit. And he was just really touched by the fact that his daughter was remembered. So, if you have any extra little cash lying around and you can help out in that way, it would be wonderful.
If people are willing to do that, how can they contact you to make donations such as that?
So they can just go to the NAMI Minnesota website. Our email is on there. It's NAMI Helps, HELPS, at NAMIMN.org. The information is on our website, which is NAMIMN.org. And, we can connect. We are, there's a very small crew in the office right now. So we can run down and get your gift and bring it up, so you don't have to, come into the building or anything like that. We're trying to be, frankly, as safe as we can. But that's an easy way to do it. So if you don't want it shipped directly from Amazon or Target or whatever, you can call us to drop it off and we'll come down and get it from you.
Yeah, I think that's just an amazing resource. And I just think so many people are, like you said, just going to be so happy to receive even such a small thing. And do you have, I noticed like now that there's just so many tents, for the homeless as some of the shelters are closing. Do you get a lot of calls for people who are homeless looking for resources?
We do, unfortunately, more from family members, right? Because their loved one is, very sick, maybe doesn't think that they're sick, doesn't want to be in a shelter because you're too close to other people. And so sometimes families are calling us trying to find their loved one. And so we usually, contact the homeless outreach workers so that they know that they can look out for the person. But affordable housing is it's just not there. And if you're living on SSI, under $1,000 a month, what can you afford?
Yeah.
And, and for some people, especially if you've been picked up and you have you've been in jail, you have a record of some kind. If you've been committed, because that's a public record. If you have a bad rental history, you're not going to find anywhere to live. And so that, I think, makes it even worse. So we have always pushed at the legislature for more funding for supportive housing, funding for what's called the Bridges program, which is basically Section 8 for people with a serious mental illness. But just trying to make sure that people you can't work on your recovery, whether it's for a mental illness or a substance use, if you don't have a safe place to live.
That's so true, Sue. I think that's all of our questions for today, Sue, unless you had anything that you wanted to add.
One other thing I just want to mention is we have peer-led support groups. So we train actually people with mental illnesses who are doing well and family members to lead the support groups. It is so helpful to talk to people who have traveled a similar path, and you just learn from each other so much. And so, if you're struggling, please join one of our groups. You don't have to show your face, but I don't know, I think we gain a lot of knowledge from each other. These aren't necessarily, easy paths to take. And during this time especially, it's even harder. So, I just really want to encourage people, take care of yourselves. Give yourself space and grace. We are not going to be at our best during a pandemic. We're going to have some days when we screw up and when we're not the nicest that we should be. But grace and space during this time, I think, is critical. And thank you so much for having me on today as well.
Yep. Sue, thank you for joining us. I guess in closing, I should say, it's okay to not be okay, especially in times like this. And, reach out and get the assistance you need. Sue Abderholden, thank you for joining us today. I'm Charlie Brose.
And I'm Patricia Karlberg.
And this has been Disability Landscape. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much.